Hello everyone, I'm Igor Smirnov, International Grandmaster and Chess Coach. This is the course How to Beat Title Players, Lesson 4, The Third Weapon. The key idea of the whole concept of beating stronger players is that you need to create problems for them. Therefore, you should make the situation difficult and unpleasant for them. That's why, in this lesson, I would like to discuss complications. No one likes complications. All of us prefer things that are simple and easy to use. During the chess game, most players, when given the choice, intuitively choose simplification. So if you want to create problems for your strong opponent, you should complicate the position. You should make it unclear, unbalanced, sharp, and difficult to play. Perhaps you also don't like to play complicated positions. Maybe you say, well, I can complicate the position, but it will be more difficult not only for my opponent, but for me as well. That's true, but there is one important thing you should remember, which changed the situation. If you start playing a new style, your first games will probably not be that great. However, if you keep playing in this style, your results will improve. After some time, you will start feeling confident even in very complicated positions. Your opponents will still be afraid of complications. They will feel nervous and will make a lot of mistakes. All in all, you will get a huge advantage over most of your opponents. Okay, now let's think about how you can complicate the position. There are three strategic motifs I want you to take note of. The first one, avoid exchanges. It's simple. Don't exchange the pieces if you have a choice. When there are more pieces on the board, the situation will remain complex. The second advice, increase the tension. How can you do it? There are two steps here. The first step, move your pieces forward and create contact between your pieces and your opponent's pieces. Create a situation where a lot of pieces attack each other. And then the second step, increase the tension and of course don't remove it. Don't exchange pieces and don't move them backward. It's all about increasing the tension. The third way, create an asymmetrical position. There are quite a lot of ways to make chess positions asymmetrical. For example, castle on opposite wins. Next, play for a position where you have a pawn majority. Next, exchange non-identical pieces. For example, exchange your knight for an opponent's bishop, or a queen for two rooks, and so on. Next, create an imbalance. For example, if you can weaken your pawn structure for more piece activity, do it. A positional sacrifice is another important example of asymmetry in chess. Here we may conclude that in general, our main goal is to make the position as complicated as possible. By the way, if you look at the games of top grandmasters, you will see that they do it pretty often. Okay, let's observe some examples. It's a typical Sicilian position. How can white complicate it? Knight f3. First, white saves the pieces from an exchange. Black played b5. Now white needs to increase the tension, so he played e5. White is creating the contact between the pieces. After that, we should increase the tension and should not remove it. That's why after knight e8, white played knight e4, and after f5, knight g5. White is still keeping the tension and doesn't want to make any exchanges. There follow d takes, f takes, knight b4, c3 to protect the pawn and push away the knight, and knight d5. The scene is now set for white to make a positional sacrifice, so rook takes d5. A positional sacrifice is one of the way how to create the position unbalanced. E takes d5, queen h3, h6, and e6. Important to know that white always moves forward and doesn't move back or retreat. Bishop takes g5, and here white could just take both bishops with e takes d7, taking the rook and the knight. Then after queen takes, white can take another one on the g5, getting a winning position. Here I want that you pay attention on how easily white won. A nearly equal position became winning after just a few moves. It happened because almost all the black's moves were mistakes. It was not because black was a weak player. It's because no one likes to play complicated positions, and almost nobody can do it well. Here is another example. It's the black's turn now. Most players would play here something like bishop e7 and castling kingside. Of course, the position would be very standard in this case, and it will be very difficult for black to win it somehow. So the question is, can black complicate this position? Of course he can. You can nearly always complicate chess positions. In this game, black played queen c7, preparing to castle queenside. After c4, castle and rook e1, we got this position. Okay, so black has made the situation asymmetrical. Now it's time to think for black how to increase the tension. As you know, to increase the tension, we need to move something forward and create the contact between the pieces. That's why here black should think about the moves like e5 or c5. And of course, black needs to be very careful while making the moves like this, because it's a tactical moves and you need to calculate the variations very well. However, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It only means that you need to be careful and calculate the variations properly. In the game, black played c5 and white answered d5. Okay, now it looks like black needs to take on d5 because the e6 pawn is under the attack. But you already know that we shouldn't make the moves which seems obvious. First of all, we need to realize, is the white's move d takes e6 really a threat or not? Here we can see that if white takes the pawn on the e6, that will open the d line for the black's rooks, which is actually not so bad for him. That is how can we come to the idea of a positional sacrifice, so realize and ignore an idea. That's why black played bishop d6, sacrificing that pawn onto the e6. Then after d takes e6 and knight e5, we can see that black's position became much more active and much more promising. Then followed queen f5 to protect the pawn on the e6 and keep his material advantage. F takes, queen e6, king b8. And now white has two bishops and a material advantage. White is up a pawn. However, the black's position is much more active. He is favoring development. He is taking the white's position. So you see that situation became very unbalanced. And that's exactly what we were trying to do. Okay, white played bishop e2, then suddenly rook h e8, taking the queen and pushing it away. Then after queen f5 and knight takes c4, the position became very sharp. By the way, again, black won this position easily after the next few moves. This is another example, and it's white's turn now. Of course, white can play something like queen d2, bishop f3, queen h1, and get a standard Sicilian position. Can white complicate the position somehow? Again, if you want to complicate the position, you just need to think about how to create problems for your opponent. Then you can come to the move g4, with an idea of g5 attacking the black's knight. White used an idea of breaking the balance. White weakened his king, but got some attacking chances. Black played h5, then it was g5, knight g4, bishop takes, pawn takes. Now white certainly can take the pawn with the move queen takes g4, but it's not an attacking move and it doesn't create problems for black. That's why white played g6, creating the contact between the pieces. In the game they played castle, g takes f7, rook h3 and f5. We have already discussed counterblows in the previous lessons. They work really well in complex positions because you need to increase the tension and you don't want to make passive defensive moves. In this example, after d5 and bishop f4, the position became very unbalanced and just really crazy. In the end, white won the game. This example is a great illustration of the fact that if you want to complicate a position, you need to attack, not fear complications and take some chances. Don't fear risky play. Your opponent's risk is much greater because it's more difficult to defend than it is to attack. Here is one more example, and it's white's turn. Most players will play here castling without thinking about anything else. Black will also play bishop e7, then make castling, and the situation will be quite simple and standard. Let's try to find something more interesting for white. One of the typical ideas, which you already know, is the different side castles. This is how you can come to the idea of moving the queen or the bishop. Therefore, the moves candidates are queen d3, queen f3, and bishop g5. Why did I mention these moves exactly? It's because they are the most forward moves of these pieces. And as you know, according to the principle of maximum of activity, we should move the pieces as forward as possible. Now, the move queen f3 here is the most promising because it not only prepares castling queenside but also creates the threat of e5 move, which works, for instance, in the variation bishop e7, e5, taking the knight. If black takes, then white can take on c6, taking the black's queen and bishop e7. If black take on c6, white also recaptures, making check and attacking the rook a8. That's white forces black to move his knight back. Knight bd7, but here of course the black's position is very unpleasant. White has a lot of things to do. For example, white can play bishop e3, make castle queenside, and taking the black's knight on d7. White can go knight d5 and make a lot of other attacking ideas. That's why in the game black played c5. Of course, white should go forward, knight f5, and bishop takes f5. Now it looks like white should make the most natural move queen takes f5. However, you shouldn't forget that we're looking for something special. Here white has a good chance to take with a pawn, e takes f5, and make the position more asymmetrical. By the way, at the same time, white is creating a threat queen c6 check, forcing the black's knight to go back. Black played rook b8 to attack the b2 pawn and stop the eventual threat queen c6 check. Of course, white still wants to make castling queenside, so we need to prepare it with the move b3 and bishop b2. There followed bishop e7, bishop b2, d5, castle queenside, and c6. Okay, the position became quite asymmetrical, White has created the pawn majority on the king side in the opening, and of course now it's time to use it. So the move is g4. You can see that White has complicated the position significantly just in a few moves. Black made castle, g5, knight d7, f6. A positional sacrifice is one of the standard ways to make the situation more unbalanced. Here it's very natural, of course, because it opens the black's king. After g takes f6, White can use the idea of a positional sacrifice one more time. By the way, it's quite easy to find the right moves here if you use the right way of thinking. You know that to find the attacking moves, we need to divide the board in two parts and try to find the attacking moves on the black's territory, the attacking and the forcing moves there. That is how you can come to the ideas like g takes f6, knight takes d5, and rook takes d5. All of these moves are pretty interesting, but the best way is the move knight takes d5. It's a positional sacrifice to open the position, which gives White a very powerful attack. After c takes, which is forced, and rook takes d5, Black can protect his knight d7 and his king at the same time, so White's winning. For example, in the line f takes g5, queen f5, it's to attack the knight on d7, and also in some variations White can take on g5 with the queen. And after rook b7, White is increasing the pressure, rook h d1, then Black has no defense for his knight d7, so White will take back the piece and saves the winning attack. Let's look at the last example in this lesson. Here Black played knight takes c3, and it looks like White has only logical move queen takes c3. Most players would do it automatically. Do you remember the question what else I can do from the previous lessons? This position is a very good example. White played b takes c3 instead. White disrupted the balance. He weakened his pawns, but got an open file. Knight c6. Now White can create contact between the pawns by playing e4, increasing the tension. They then played e5, d takes, d takes. White wants to use the open d line for his rook now. So he played rook b1 first, and after a6, rook d1. We can see that already White's position became very active and interesting. Queen e8. Okay, now White needs to increase the tension somehow. Do you remember how to create and increase the tension? We should move the pieces forward, attack something, and create the contact between the pieces. That's why White played rook d5, taking the pawn e5 with the knight and the rook. Bishop e6. Now, of course, White don't want to move the rook backward. As usual, we need to increase the tension and not remove it. That's why it's a great chance for White to make powerful positional sacrifice, which he did actually by playing rook takes b7. After bishop takes d5 and pawn takes, Black won the exchange, but White got a very good compensation because of his strong pawns in the center, his active pieces. His rook is taking c7 pawn, knight is taking e5 pawn, he's got a pair of powerful bishops, so the White's compensation is really great. And the main thing is that White has made the position very unbalanced and complicated. Finally, White won this game pretty easily. All the aforementioned examples illustrate the point that it's almost always possible to complicate chess positions. You just need to try to do it. Okay, let's draw some conclusions. The first conclusion: if you want to complicate a position, you should avoid exchanges, increase the tension, and create asymmetry. The second conclusion: to find powerful moves, you should think about how to create problems for your opponent and take risks. And the last conclusion: it's extremely important to attack in complicated positions. When the position is unbalanced, both players have different advantages. The attacking side will be able to use his advantages to stop the opponent's plans, because the opponent will be forced to defend. Remember, in chess it's much easier to find the practical attacking moves than the precise defending moves. Okay, we have finished with this lesson and I'm waiting for you in the next one.